Next, we're going to be having a look at Gestalt principles, which these are what we referred to a little bit earlier when we were talking about we have these different principles which actually guide how we perceive the things that we see. So these are classed under psychological influences on visual perception. And one of the subcategories of that is these Gestalt principles. So what are Gestalt principles? They are based on the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So this means that our brain attempts to perceive visual information as a meaningful whole. So instead of seeing smaller isolated parts of information, our brain attempts to create like a whole picture. Like, for example, this smiley face in the bottom right-hand corner. I don't just see all of these individual little dots. My brain actually sees it as a meaningful whole because of these different principles. Because our brain, in essence, is trying to fill in gaps and say, I don't want to just see all the random parts. I'm going to fill in the gaps, I'm going to make a guess, and I'm going to see what I think I'm meant to be seeing. So the first Gestalt principle is figure-ground organization, which occurs when we focus on an object visually. So it's called figure-ground organization. So the first part, the figure, is the object that we're focusing on, and it's separated from the ground, or like the background or surrounding objects, by a contour line owned by the figure. So for example, Rubens' vase in the top right-hand corner, or the Apple logo. So it's the figure, what we're focusing on, is separated from the background by that contour line. An interesting side note, camouflage is actually a special type of figure-ground organization when the contour is deliberately, like that line is deliberately blended in with the background. And the goal of camouflage is that the figure isn't meant to be perceived. The next Gestalt principle is closure, which is when we perceive an object as being whole, despite it actually being incomplete. So again, this closure is a massive instance of our brain filling in the gaps. So for example, in this image here, you might see a triangle. The interesting thing is though, is that there is actually not a triangle there. There is no white triangle, but because of how this image has been constructed, we think there is, because closure has been applied. Our brain has filled in the gaps and assumed that there is a white triangle there. The next one is similarity, which occurs when individuals perceive an object based on the parts that are similar. So for example, it might have elements that are similar in size, shape, or color, and so we perceive it a certain way due to that similarity. So for example, here in this image, I'm going to perceive like these diamonds. I kind of perceive this section as a meaningful whole, and then I perceive like the circles together because I'm perceiving it in a certain way due to the similarity of the individual objects. Or for example, this one here, these objects are all similar in color, so I'm perceiving them kind of more as like a meaningful whole. Again, it's just because of the similarity. I'm perceiving it a certain way because of the similarity. Or the last one, or another good example of similarity is here. I'm perceiving this as lines of dots or columns of dots instead of rows because of the similarity of like the color and structure. The last one is proximity, which is when we perceive something a certain way due to proximity. So for example, I'm perceiving these singular dots as like a continual smiley face line because of their proximity to each other. Their proximity is influencing how I'm perceiving them.